Happy Canada Day, folks. Now what a day to give you my final video of this mini-series. We've opened the curtain wide and watched Trump extort the world. We've seen Carney build a bypass, but today we look ahead. And honestly, what we're going to talk about might be the most important thing I've ever covered. Here's the breakdown for today's final. First, the voter crisis, why nearly 90 million eligible Americans sat out the 2024 election, and what that means for democracy. Second, the unqualified conman, how a failed businessman, convicted felon, and serial bankruptcy end up in the most powerful office on earth. Third, the puppet masters, the wealthy force and organizations that put Trump in place and why they did it. And fourth, the nightmare scenario. What happens if a Project 2025 backed candidate wins again in 2028? And how would it permanently change America? This is the final today, my friends. No cliffhanger, just the truth. Let's start with the hard truth. Kamala Harris did not lose the 2024 election because of people who voted against her. She lost because of people who had better things to do than to vote. According to the US Census Bureau, 244 million Americans were eligible to vote in 2024. Let's start with the hard truth. Kamala Harris did not lose the 2024 election because of people who voted against her. She lost because of people who had better things to do than to vote. According to the US Census Bureau, 244 million Americans were eligible to vote in 2024. About 77.3 million voted for Trump. About 75 million voted for Harris. But roughly 90 million, that's 37% of the entire electorate, just sat it out. 2/3 of the country divided their loyalty between two major parties. The other third, they stayed at home. Why? Some folks thought Harris had it in the bag. They didn't bother showing up. Stupid. Others? Well, let's be honest. There's a segment of the Americans that simply couldn't bring themselves to vote for a woman of color, no matter how qualified she was. The numbers didn't lie. Hispanic support for Democrats dropped from 70% in 2016 to just 54% for Harris. Among Latino men, it fell below 50%. What's wrong with those people? The Democratic Party cannot let this happen again. If they do, they are handing the country to the people who wants to dismantle it. Here's the Canadian take. We watched and we were scratching our heads. Americans will fight tooth and nails for a barbecue sauce recipe. And when it comes to defending their own flippant democracy, 90 million people say, no, I'll pass today. Let's talk about Donald Trump. Not the TV version, the real ones. Nobody in their right mind would hire Donald Trump for any position of responsibility. Think about it. What are his qualifications? First, he inherited over 400 million from his father. That's not self-made, my friends, that's winning the lottery. Second, he burned through over $1 billion between 1985 and 1994. Poor investments, failed projects. He bankrupted 6 of his companies. He stiffed his contractors. Hundreds of lawsuits, unpaid plumbers, mechanics, carpenters, painters. This guy couldn't even run a hot dog stand without going broke. Third, he is a convicted felon, 34 counts of fixing business records, and a civil verdict for sexual abuse. but he managed to protect his assets via licensing deals and reality TV. The Apprentice made him look like the deal maker, when he was actually just a charlatan who knew how to sell his name. So why did Americans hire him for the biggest job in the country? Because he's the useful idiot. Donald Trump didn't get elected because he's a genius. He got elected because of powerful people behind him. Behind the scene, a network of extraordinary wealthy individuals and organizations had a plan. They needed a charismatic frontman, effectively a conman who could sell snake oil to the masses. And Trump was that guy. Enter Project 2025. This isn't some fringe conspiracy theory. This is a 900-page policy blueprint published by the Heritage Foundation, a conservative think tank with decades of influence. Kevin Roberts, the president of the Heritage Foundation, has been crystal clear about the goals. He said his organization's role is to institutionalize Trumpism. Think about that. Project 2025 is backed by over 100 right-wing organizations. Its authors includes more than 140 people who served in Trump's first administration. It's a massive, coordinated effort to reshape American governance. Let's look at the key players. The Heritage Foundation, founded in 1973. They have been shaping Republican policy since the Reagan era. Kevin Roberts is the president. He is a close ally of Trump. Surprise here. Paul Dance, the original director of Project 2025, he called the plan an instructional manual for the second Trump term. Russell Ward is the primary intellectual architect of the Project 2025. He authored the transitional playbook and a chapter in expanding executive authority. He also currently serves as Trump director in the Office of Management and Budget. He is actually the guy who keeps an eye on Trump. And then, of course, there's Peter Thiel. This is where it gets really interesting, eh? Thiel is the billionaire tech investor who serves as the ultimate political bridge between Silicon Valley and the new right. Thiel is G.D. Vance's patron. He was Vance's boss at Mitchell Capital, bankrolled Vance's 2022 Senate run with $15 million, and is the force behind Vance's rise to the vice president. Thiel's philosophy aligns perfectly with Project 2025. He famously wrote in 2009 that he no longer believes in freedom and democracy are compatible. He wants to dismantle the administrative state and replace it with a streamlined corporate hierarchy. And Thiel, of course, stands to profit. His company Palantir is a major defense contractor that provides data analytic tools for intelligence agencies and immigration enforcement. Project 2025 calls for a massive overhaul of the Defense Department to favor AI-driven technology, exactly the ones Thiel's company provides. Coincidence? Well, the bottom line, Trump isn't a mastermind. He's the frontman. The real power is behind the scene. So here's the question that keeps me up at night. What if a Project 2025 backed candidate wins presidency in 2028? It would mean that the goals of Project 2025 would continue with institutionalizing Trumpism. Project 2025 isn't about policies, it's about power. Tens of thousands of career civil servants would be reclassified as political appointees or fired. The goal is to remove independent experts who might resist executive directives and replace them with loyalties. The unitary executive theory means the president has absolute control over the entire executive branch. Independent agencies like the Department of Justice, the FBI, and the Federal Trade Commission would lose their autonomy. Law enforcement would be politicized, political allies rewarded, adversaries punished. Under Project 2025, the federal government would be used to impose a hard-right cultural agenda, eliminate Department of Education and DEI programs and erase transgender recognition from federal policies, restrict abortion access using the Comstock Act, roll back climate science and clean energy initiatives, criminalize pornography and imprison those who produce it. Project 2025 promotes using federal troops and the National Guard to execute mass deportations inside US cities. Detention camps would be expanded. The asylum system would be effectively closed. Legal immigration would be choked off. The administration would continue on an elevated level to impose sweeping tariffs on foreign goods, disrupt global trade networks, and pull back from international alliances like NATO. Foreign aid would be completely eliminated. And this one is a big one, folks. What we are talking about isn't just change in policy. It's a change in the fundamental structure of the US government. By capturing the administrative state, a Project 2025-backed president would transition the US away from the liberal democracy towards a highly centralized nationalist autocracy, what political science call illiberate democracy, like Hungary under Urban. Once those bureaucratic structures are replaced with political loyalists, reversing the shift becomes monumentally difficult. The rules of the game will have to be fundamentally adjusted. And the Supreme Court? By then, they've already rearranged the constitutional interpretation of executive power. Alright, folks, let's bring this Canada Day home. Part 1. We watched Trump burn down the world. We saw his maximum pressure playbook and how he extorts middle powers like Canada, the EU and the UK. We saw how he's hurting his own people by taxing the poor with tariffs. In part 2, we watched Carney build a bypass. We saw the ports, the shipping routes, the strategy, to break free from US dominance. We saw that is possible, historically proven, for middle powers to escape superpower domination. In part 3, today, we talk about how Trump got into power because nearly 90 million Americans couldn't be bothered to vote. We saw that Trump is not a successful businessman, but a convicted felon who inherited millions and burned billions. We saw the force behind him, the Heritage Foundation, Project 2025, and the puppet masters like Peter Thiel, who have their own agenda. And we saw the nightmare scenario. What is going to happen if another Trump-like figure wins in 2028 and institutionalizes this authoritarian project permanently? Here's what this means for Canada. We know if the US continues down this road, we cannot rely on them. Not for trade, not for security, not for anything. Mark Carney's strategy of building a global survival network isn't just smart, it's absolutely essential. The Americans are going through something very dark and dangerous. We don't have to be part of that. But here's the good news. We can do it. History proves it. Middle powers have escaped superpower domination before. Europe did it in the 1970s. I know, I was there. The Hanseatic League did it in the 14th century. ASEAN did it during the Cold War. Canada can do it too. It's going to be a marathon, not a sprint. It's going to take 10 to 15 years of hard work. But the math works. The strategy is sound. And the alternatives? Staying dependent on a country that is sliding into fascism? It's far worse. So folks, stay informed, stay engaged, and for the love of democracy, if you are an American, vote. If you are Canadian, support the diversification strategy. Build the infrastructure, strengthen the alliance, and never, ever take democracy for granted. And for God's sakes, continue the boycott. Don't buy their stuff. Don't cross the border. Here's my question for you in the comments. After everything we covered in this three-part series, do you believe the US is heading towards an illiberate democracy? Or will the institution hold? And what does it mean for Canada? Please drop your thoughts in the comments below. Hit the like button, subscribe, and share this series with someone who needs to hear it. Keep your elbows up, folks. We are in for the long fight. And remember, the impossible is possible. We just have to be willing to fight for it. Thanks for watching. I'm Wilfried Lemkuller with Europe Curious, where we don't just repeat the daily headlines, but open the curtain so you can see for yourself what's really behind it. See you next one.